Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. As the Leaders Summit wrapped up in Mexico City, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says it was a big win for Canada. Property values in Lethbridge have gone up more than 7.5%. We hear from the city's assessment and taxation manager, who explains why there was such a huge increase. And we hear about a dog in Taber, which may have set a new Canadian record after giving birth to 17 puppies.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Police say at least one worker is missing after an explosion at a propane facility north of Montreal. Quebec Provincial Police are evacuating parts of Saint-Roch-de-Lache again because more explosions are possible. Local officials are warning people to stay away from the area near Saint-Roch-de-Lache in Quebec because of the amount of propane tanks that are on site. Fire crews are still being prudent in the response due to the dozens of hazardous materials that could potentially end up in the nearby river. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wrapped up his trip to Mexico City for the Leaders Summit as Canada celebrated a big win in a three-way trade dispute with the United States. That included cars being shipped across regional borders, providing automakers more incentive to make vehicles in those nations. The USMCA ruling will encourage companies to invest more in Canada and Mexico to get the benefit of exporting duty-free to the United States. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he does not blame U.S. President Joe Biden when he takes a protectionist approach to the U.S. economy, but he says it's very important to also stick up for Canadian industries as well.
We're ensuring that, yes, we are sticking up for Canadian jobs and creating Canadian industry and taking advantage of the tremendous opportunities that Canada has to succeed in international trade and international markets. And we're doing it by leveraging the incredible advantages we have on the continent. That's exactly what President Biden has been focused on. And to be even more direct about it, if there actually was a contradiction between sticking up for America first and working with your friends, the previous president would have succeeded in scrapping NAFTA.
Alberta Premier Daniel Smith has sent a letter to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau encouraging him to have Japan consider Alberta for some of its energy needs. In her letter, Premier Smith reminded Trudeau about Alberta's signed Memorandum of Understanding with Japan Oil, Gas and Metals National Corporation to expand market access for Alberta's energy sector. She says Japan is the second largest global importer of liquefied natural gas, with 10% of it coming from Russia. Smith says with the war in Ukraine, that has made things tougher for many countries, including Japan, with increased energy needs, and Alberta can fill that need. In her letter, Premier Smith also reiterated that Alberta's energy firms are committed to investing $24 billion on projects to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 22 million tons by the year 2030 and achieve a goal of net zero by the year 2050. The Alberta government says the federal court has granted Alberta's application to intervene in 6 lawsuits against the Trudeau government, banning more than 1,500 models of firearms. The court granted our province the ability to intervene on the non-constitutional issues. The federal government advised the federal court they would not oppose Alberta's application. Provinces have the automatic right to intervene on constitutional matters, but on non-constitutional issues, provinces must seek permission of the court. Alberta will submit its written argument to the federal court early next month. The lawsuits are scheduled to be heard in April of this year. The province announced 36 new community transition beds in Edmonton to help some of that city's most vulnerable. Premier Daniel Smith says it's very important to provide people with housing after they're discharged from an emergency department. She says this new initiative should also free up more emergency beds.
We know that there are significant demands on our emergency departments, and this partnership will serve the dual benefits of improving health outcomes while also ensuring that wait times are improved. The housing offered through this program is more than just a safe and warm place. These new transitional community beds will have a positive impact on the health and wellness of some of the most vulnerable patients in the Edmonton area. It will help move individuals off the streets and into housing that's integrated with recovery-oriented supports.
A new monitoring system to help save lives is now being used by Lethbridge fire and emergency crews. Now, it helps with challenges they face when it comes to cardiac arrest cases. The system purchased in 2020 is called Case Review. Officials say it has increased the number of patients who've been resuscitated.
One of the trends we saw using this technology is that when we successfully resuscitate somebody from cardiac arrest, about 50% of the time that patient will have a low blood pressure. And if they have a low blood pressure, they're at a high risk for having another cardiac arrest. So what we were able to do working with Alberta Health Services and our medical director is we were able to take a treatment that's typically reserved for the ICU and the ER and bring it right to first responders, and we're able to deliver that to the patient in their where we find the patient and stabilize their blood pressure, avoiding that second cardiac arrest.
Officials say Lethbridge is the only city in the province currently using this technology. Well, it was slightly cooler today across much of southwestern Alberta, with some regions even seeing light flurries. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, any of the white stuff we may have seen should quickly melt as the mercury is going back up?
Yeah, true story, Hal. It's about to get really warm. And you know, those flurries kind of came out of nowhere, didn't they? Although here in Lethbridge, we didn't get hit too hard with them, although we were supposed to see that slight chance today over the noon hour. But you are right. Any remaining snow in the region should definitely be gone by tomorrow and later on into the weekend, because look at what we're about to be hit by, those double digits. So after an overnight low of 3 degrees this evening, we're looking at a high of 10 degrees Friday with a mix of sun and cloud. And basically the same kind of forecast for Saturday. I'll be back later in the show to give you that 7-day forecast.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. A number of Lethbridge homeowners have been shocked with the property assessments they've been receiving in the mail. On average, property values increased just over 7.5%. Now, in the past, home values traditionally only increased between 2 and 3%. Our municipal taxes are also going up 5.1% for each of the next 4 years. Now, to talk about the assessment increases in more detail is the City of Lethbridge Manager of Assessment and Taxation, Larry Laverty, who joins us now from City Hall. Larry, many would argue their property values have actually gone down in a number of markets, especially coming out of the pandemic, and with mortgage rates going back up by quite a bit. So how do you respond to that?
The assessment is based on July 1st, 2022. So it's market value as of July 1st, 2022. Assessment's always 1 year behind. It's provincially mandated to be that way. So the market actually was very strong in the last couple of years.
So is the City of Lethbridge potentially looking into lowering the mill rate now?
There's 3 parts of the equation. There's the assessment, the total assessment. There's the city budget, and then there's the tax rate. Usually when assessments go up, at a rate like 7.65%, like it did this year, you will see a slight decrease in the mill rate.
Now, if a homeowner disagrees with the city's assessment on their property, how can they appeal?
Well, the first thing to do is call us. We have assessors waiting to answer questions about your property. They can provide you comparable sales of your property, let you know what's right or not. If there happens to be some information that's not correct, we'll fix that.
Thanks so much for your time, Larry. That was Larry Laverty, Assessment and Taxation Manager with the City of Lethbridge. By the way, Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Higgin says he'll have more detail as to the assessments, mill rate, and what the extra revenue is going towards during his State of the City address coming up at the end of the month. This month, the Alberta government will begin distributing its affordability plan benefit of $600 to seniors over the age of 65 and families with kids under the age of 18 with a household annual income of under $180,000. However, this still leaves out a huge majority of tax-paying Albertans during this inflationary crisis. According to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, there are other cuts coming, which would be of huge benefit for nearly all Albertans.
I would point folks towards the fact that they've gotten rid of bracket creep. And so what that means in normal people talk is that now your income tax brackets are keeping up with inflation, right? And so that means that you won't automatically be bumped into the next tax bracket and paying more in taxes. On average, that's supposed to be saving every Albertan around $300. So even if you don't have children, even if you're not a senior, you should be saving money on your income tax provincially. So that's really good news. And also the one that I'm most happy about is the fuel tax suspension. So the entire Alberta fuel tax of 13 cents per liter is now suspended completely for the next 6 months at least.
Make sure you catch the entire interview with Chris Sims, the Alberta director of the CTF, and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up on this weekend edition of Bridge City News. Well, it's almost time to don your best winter clothing and shoes for the coldest night of the year event, February 25th in downtown Lethbridge. The initiative raises funds for local charities to help provide more support for our most vulnerable. This year, there will be 2 walks supporting both Woods Homes and Streets Alive Mission. Jennifer Lepko, the Director of Fund Development for Streets Alive, says the group has a fundraising goal of around $75,000.
We know that there's a need for it. We know the number of people on the street, and the money that we do raise during the coldest night of the year really does go directly to some of those outreach supports that Streets Alive Mission has done since the get-go. The core of what Streets Alive Mission has always done is making sure that those basic needs are met for people that are really struggling. Those funds go directly to our outreach that we've been doing forever.
Last year, the event brought in around 250 walkers. Officials are hopeful for the same number this year. Now, since 2011, the coldest night of the year has raised over $57 million across Canada in 166 different communities. Troy Bossman-Knowlton has been elected as the new chief of the Piikani Nation. The results rolled in following the general election on January the 9th. Knowlton beat out runner-up Adam North Pagan by a 450 to 264 vote count. Knowlton says his experience as a council member the past 8 years will help him in his new term as chief. Chief Knowlton says he would like to change the culture of governance and have more interaction with people. A 3-year-old Bernese mountain dog in Taber is now the mom to a litter of 15 puppies. Angela Stewart caught up with the canine's owner, who says her dog's litter could break a new record here in Canada.
Lori Jansen of Taber has her hands quite full these days, taking care of not 1, not 2, not even 10, but 15 little puppies.
It is tiring, but it's fulfilling. And for me right now, this is my job.
Her job of taking care of the pups came after her 3-year-old Bernese mountain dog Freya gave birth to this extremely large litter just 2 weeks ago. Jansen learned she was pregnant in October.
Freya was showing at least 10. And then my vet was like, I'm at least 10, she says. And it's an estimate.
On December 29th, Freya gave birth to the 10, but Jansen was surprised to have come across a few more.
When we hit 10, then 11, 12, 13, and I said to myself, she's pushing again.
17 were born, but sadly, 2 did not make it. Now with 15 little Bernedoodle puppies, Jansen believes this could be a record setter for Canada.
But I thought 17, that is amazing. And so, of course, everybody's Googling everything. So, okay, what's the largest litter?
According to Guinness World Records, the largest litter of puppies to date is 24, born to a Neapolitan Mastiff in the United Kingdom in 2004.
Oh, they're telling the brothers to be quiet.
Although caring for the pups and helping Freya parent may be a handful, Jansen says she wouldn't have it any other way.
I love doing what I'm doing here, and I would just love to share the story.
Well, when it comes to finding new homes for the pups, Jansen wants everyone to know that they are coming from a fun-loving home. And she will also be putting together an application process for those who are interested in buying one of these pups to make sure that they go to a perfect owner. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
That is so adorable. Sometimes man's best friend or even woman's best friend is not a dog. For one Lethbridge couple, it's a goat. Boots the goat has become quite the celebrity here in our city. Video journalist Micah Quinn met up with Boots and its owners to talk about the soon-to-be 11-month-old goat and his escapades around our city.
These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do.
It's been almost 60 years since Nancy Sinatra sang those classic words. Now there's a different kind of Boots walking around Lethbridge. Boots the goat is a Nigerian dwarf goat, and he loves going for walks with his owners Susan Iman and Jeff MacDonald. The couple told us that goats are very social animals that need constant companionship.
When they're alone, they stop eating, they get depressed, and then have major health issues or die. So he's with us all the time. When he's in the yard, he'll play around or he'll go eat, but then within an hour, he'll either come to the door to say hello or he'll make a sound and cry, and we'll just interact with them. We're still here, or we'll go out and play with them, home or it's time for a walk.
MacDonald is the mama who snuggles and feeds Boots, and Iman is the big sister who trains and plays with him. The couple says whenever they take Boots out for a walk, he always gets a positive reaction from passers-by.
Interacting with animals is good for mental health. And we've had so many people talk about how they went out specifically to get some fresh air, to get a break. They're having a rough day, having a rough week, and this has made their day.
Boots also does tricks, with a nice reward of a dehydrated apple once he's done.
Now he's starting to undo our zippers in our pocket and steal them. So, yeah, he wants them. He's doing it right now.
Boots is also a YouTube star with his own channel called High Five Adventures, which showcases his travels in and around Lethbridge, including trips to senior homes and even getting a pedicure.
And we get comments on there from people far and wide as well about, this is what YouTube is for. This makes me happy.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
He's not kidding around. What a great story. You know what's also great is that Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin has been released from a hospital in Buffalo, New York, a little over a week after he went into cardiac arrest and had to be resuscitated during a game in Cincinnati.
Obviously grateful first and foremost that he's home and with his parents and his brother, which is great. I'm sure it's felt like a long time since he's been able to be home naturally there, and I'm sure it's a great feeling. And yeah, we'll leave it up to him. You know, his health is first and foremost on our mind as far as his situation goes, and then when he feels ready, we welcome him back as he feels ready.
The Bills host the Miami Dolphins this Sunday at Orchard Park, New York for the first round of the NFL playoffs. Well, it was slightly cooler today here in Lethbridge. Fortunately, the temperature is going up by quite a bit as we head into the weekend. Full weather details are coming up. We may have seen some light flurry activity earlier in the day across parts of southwestern Alberta, but that's about to change. We will be well above our seasonal values very soon. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we could hit double-digit temperatures as we make our way closer to the weekend?
Yes, that's right. Look at these temperatures, up to 10 degrees on Friday with a mix of sun and cloud. Partly cloudy skies also for Saturday. Also looking at a high of 10 degrees there, loving those double digits. And then we're going to drop all the way down to 1 degree on a Sunday. So I guess Saturday's the day to get out there and enjoy. Back up to 6 degrees on Monday with plenty of sunshine. 0 on Tuesday, and then up to 3 on Wednesday. So we're mainly staying above that 0 mark, mostly in the pluses, keeping us above the average high for this time of year. -2 is that average high. -14 is the average low. 14 was our high temperature on this day back in '87, and in 1998 it was -39. Sun rose this morning at 8:25 and sunset this evening at 4:54 p.m., giving us just under 8 hours and a half. So we're looking at 8 hours, 29 minutes. Okay, so we are looking at a wind warning in effect for Victoria, up to 90K winds this evening in the Harrow Strait, but down to 50K tomorrow. Also looking at periods of rain, 11 degrees the high there, 11. Also the high in Vancouver. Vancouver seeing heavy rains tomorrow, -5 the high in Edmonton, and 6 degrees the high in Calgary tomorrow. As we look to the rest of the prairies, Saskatoon sitting at -10, -1 in Regina, and Winnipeg coming in tomorrow at -4 for the high with partly cloudy skies. There's some fog patches as well in many of those prairie cities. It should be dissipating in the morning or by noon at the latest. As we look to the central part of the country, snowfall in effect. There's actually a winter storm warning in effect for both Ottawa and Montreal tomorrow. Toronto seeing some snow as well, -2 the high there. Same thing for Ottawa, -1 the high in Montreal. Now there's also winter storm warnings in effect for Fredericton. Fredericton also seeing some heavy rains as well. So at least 10 centimeters of snow, possibly 5 to 10 millimeters of rain as well. 6 degrees the high there. 10 the high in Halifax. Charlottetown also seeing some freezing rain mixed with drizzle, mixed with snow. 8 degrees the high there. -4 tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland. And there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Bridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
A new report says the Bank of Canada could lose billions of dollars over the next few years. The study from the C.D. Howe Institute says total losses over the next 2 to 3 years could add up to $8.8 billion. Economics professor Trevor Toome, who co-wrote the report, says the size of the losses will be determined by interest rates over the next few years. Last fall, the central bank posted its first loss in its 87-year history, losing $522 million in the first quarter. You know, when it comes to conflict in the workplace, it is sometimes attributed to generational differences. That's according to Dr. Tim Elmore, who's the CEO of Growing Leaders and author of the book called New Kind of Diversity. Dr. Elmore says age gaps in the workplace can sometimes cause issues.
I was at a conference just a few years ago that was the impetus for this book. I was talking to CEOs after this event on conflict resolution, and they were still wondering why they were sensing so much conflict when it wasn't between departments or just personnel. And they came to the conclusion that it was the different generations they had on their team. They had Generation Z, they had millennials, they had Xers, they had boomers, they even had a couple of builder generation folks. And it was like an epiphany hit them. The diversity they were sensing really was the different values and communication styles that these different generations brought to the team.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Dr. Elmore and myself coming up after Business News. Barbie has undergone yet another transformation, and it's just ahead of a summer film depicting the iconic doll. The new version was created for children as young as the age of 3. My First Barbie is taller than the traditional doll with a larger waist and permanently attached undergarments.
The first thing we knew we wanted to address was we wanted to make the scale of our new preschool My First Barbie bigger. For example, our new My First Barbie is almost 2 inches bigger than our current fashion doll. So the current Barbie doll is 11.5 inches. This is now 13.5 inches. So it's a taller doll, which is just easier to manage. In addition, we created a softer body, more articulation in the arms and the legs. And we also, interestingly, closed the hands of the doll, like this.
As opposed to what?
As opposed to fingers, kind of open, especially the thumb. When you're dressing and undressing, kids don't get frustrated with sleeves getting stuck on the thumbs.
I guess that could get frustrating for kids. By the way, the live action film about Barbie starring Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling hits theaters in July. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 186 points on the day to finish at 20,211. The Dow was up 216 points to 34,189. The S&P 500 was up 13 on the day to 3983. And the NASDAQ was up 69 points to 11,001. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 98 cents to 78.39 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was up 2 cents to 3.70 U.S. Gold was down a cent to 18.9708 U.S. an ounce, and silver was even at 23.78 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12.03 per bushel, barley's at $9.51, canola's at $19.03, and corn is at $11.18 per bushel. Live cattle February contract was down 20 cents to $157.55. Feeder cattle January contract was down $1 to $182.13. And lean hogs February contract was down 55 cents to $78.75. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.82 U.S. Recapping one of our top stories, the province says the federal court has granted Alberta's application to intervene in 6 lawsuits against the Trudeau government banning more than 1,500 models of firearms. Alberta will submit its written argument to the federal court early next month. The lawsuits are scheduled to be heard in April of this year. Well, it turns out some of the tensions at your workplace may be attributed to a generational gap. That includes baby boomers taking issues with millennials and vice versa. Dr. Tim Elmore, CEO of Growing Leaders, will explain shortly. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You may have noticed that the North American workforce is experiencing perhaps the most disruptive shift we have ever seen. The pandemic saw millions of people work remotely, and many still do work from home. Now, as employers and employees, how do we address the so-called new normal? Dr. Tim Elmore is the CEO of Growing Leaders, an Atlanta, Georgia-based nonprofit organization created to develop emerging leaders. He's also author of the book called A New Kind of Diversity, Making the Different Generations on Your Team a Competitive Advantage. Dr. Elmore, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you, Hal. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Pleasure to have you on. Now, how would you best describe your book?
Well, the book really is about the diversity we're seeing, but it's a kind of an elephant in the room. I think we readily talk about ethnic diversity, and we should, and gender diversity and income diversity. But I was at a conference just a few years ago that was the impetus for this book. I was talking to CEOs after this event on conflict resolution, and they were still wondering why they were sensing so much conflict when it wasn't between departments or just personnel. And they came to the conclusion that it was the different generations they had on their team. They had Generation Z, they had millennials, they had Xers, they had boomers, they even had a couple of builder generation folks. And it was like an epiphany hit them. That the diversity they were sensing really was the different values and communication styles that these different generations brought to the team. Well, that set me on a hunt. I was on a search now. How can we better help these organizations, these schools, these nonprofits, these businesses better build bridges between these generations rather than walls, which we tend to naturally build. If we see a young person that is so different and so odd, we tend to just put up walls rather than bridges. So the book is about how do we build bridges rather than walls between these generations.
Now, we'll talk about some of the generational gaps and how we're building the bridges in just a moment here, Dr. Elmore. But let's talk about working remotely as well. Do you find that the millennials were more easily adaptable in that regard than maybe some of the Generation Xers or baby boomers?
Absolutely. In fact, we saw something quite interesting. Yes, they were way more adaptable to the technology that was needed to work virtually, but it was the younger generations, Gen Z and millennials, that were most hungry to come back. And I think it was because they needed to build the social capital that maybe boomers had built for decades already. They were saying, hey, fine, I'm good here. So it was a very interesting mixture of, I know how to do this technology, but I need to be building the social capital that only comes sometimes with face-to-face interactions.
Now, you're right that the generation gap, which is first noticed in the 1960s, has really widened today. And you say it has made collaboration and synergy on a team more challenging than ever. What are some of the bigger challenges that people in the workplace are facing today?
Yeah, well, the best way I can probably respond to this in a short amount of time would be to say, I think the same work that we put into a cross-cultural or cross-cultural interaction is the same work we're going to need to put into a person from a very different generation. So Hal, you and I both know if we got on a plane and flew to China right now, we would psych ourselves up to work hard after we landed at interacting and connecting with those people there because they speak different language, they have different customs, they have different values. Bingo. I think when I walk into my office and I see a 22-year-old and I'm 62, I got to go, okay, there's going to be some work here. It's worth it, but it's going to be work. And I think sometimes we're just lazy, if I can be honest, socially lazy. Sometimes we have egos that get in the way of our learning from perhaps a person from a very different generation. So the hardships come when we're not really willing to put in the work that we know is necessary to really build that connection.
You know, I'm glad you brought up the term lazy, because in my family, some of the baby boomers look at the millennials as being lazy, unmotivated, what are you contributing to society? Where the millennials look at the boomers and say, yeah, okay, boomer, whatever. You know, so there's that, almost seems like a disrespect, and us as the Generation X, you know, I've got the millennial kids, I'm like, whoa, easy guys, come on, let's relax here. Like, can't we all just get along? So how do we kind of try and bridge that gap?
Yeah, that is in essence is the issue here. Let me share a quick story. Maggie and Antonio worked together. Maggie is the hiring manager. Antonio was a 24-year-old when this story happened. And he interviewed well. She decided to hire him. He had a great work ethic, it seemed. But Antonio wore a long sleeve shirt. that day. And Maggie went through the fact that at this particular company, there were no tattoos allowed. They felt like it might be off-putting to some of their older customers. But Antonio didn't fess up that he had a tattoo. So a few weeks into his job, he's got a short sleeve shirt on, and here's this gigantic tattoo, which you and I would say, okay, that's all right. But Maggie went, why do you have that? Why didn't you tell me at the interview that you had it? Well, suddenly he felt attacked. This is part of my very identity, and oftentimes with younger generations, their look is part of their identity, the piercing, the tattoo. Well, this started a 5 or 6 meeting interaction that did not go well most of the time, because Antonio felt attacked and Maggie felt like he wasn't being honest and it didn't have integrity. But let me tell you why I'm telling you this story. Maggie ended up finding a resolve. She said, Antonio, you're a great worker. I don't want to lose you on this team. But if I just let this go, I'm communicating to every other team member, you have to hold a standard, but Antonio didn't have to hold his standard. And that doesn't work well. So the two of them stood in front of the entire team. Antonio apologized in front of everybody that he had not been forthright and honest and so forth. Maggie said, hey, we all love this guy, don't we? We don't want to lose him. So he agreed to wear long sleeves from that point on. Maggie called corporate headquarters and said, could you consider maybe looking at this policy again? But everybody gave him a standing ovation that they had found a meeting in the middle. Somehow they'd come to some compromise where they were able to still look as though they were doing what they valued, but yet Antonio got to stay. I'm bringing this up because I think far too often we come to this divide where we feel like we're violating a principle, perhaps, or some core thing. And if we are, we shouldn't violate it. But Maggie put relationships first, and she found a way where both parties could actually work together in this setting. I think that's what we're going to have to do more and more as time marches forward.
So what are some of the key questions leaders really need to be asking at better closing the generation gap outside of, do you have any ink?
Yeah. Well, there's a few that I've been having to ask. I am in my 60s now, and so my career started more than 40 years ago. I would say one question is, am I willing to be a mentor? Now, that's not a real word. It's a combination of mentor and intern. So am I willing to pour into this generation that perhaps needs some timeless values and skills, but am I willing also to put that intern hat on when I need to learn something that I haven't picked up in the last 40 years, but it's new today, and they know it intuitively? So that would be one. Am I willing to be a teacher and a learner? And I love the term. Chip Conley came up with this term years ago, mentor. I feel like maybe that's the tip of the iceberg where every other question is going to fall under. Am I teachable, even as an older veteran of the workforce?
You know, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've been in this crazy industry over 30 years as a broadcast journalist. I work as the news director here, and I learn a lot from our young journalists that are coming through college, things that they can teach me, and at the same time, I can share some of my experiences with them.
Right. I love that.
How can a leader really connect employees in a way that will allow that really to happen, that we can learn from each other and keep those doors open?
Yeah. So the number one enemy of what you just asked, Cal, is stereotyping. We don't know that we do it, but we naturally do it. Our brains create files. We have to have files to keep everything in order up there. So we see someone say a particular phrase or do a certain activity, and we go, I know what you are. I know who you are. And we stereotype. So to fight that, I've got 3 simple but big ideas. The first one is humility. I have to approach every interaction with any age with humility. That means I can speak as if I believe I'm right, but I must listen as if I believe I'm wrong. That's huge for me. That's a game changer when I meet with 20-somethings or 30-somethings. So number 2 is respect. I know that's an age-old term, and you folks in Canada seem to do it better than we in America, but I think we've just got to exude and find ways to demonstrate I respect you, even though I'm very different than. We don't have to not be different. Difference is beautiful. We need the differences, but I need to respect you. And then the third big idea is curiosity. If I can stay curious into my 40s and 50s and 60s, oh my gosh, that keeps me in a different frame of mind. And I'm ready to hear from anybody and everybody along the way to get better. So those would be the the concepts that I would share on that one.
Do you find sometimes too with the generational gap that it's harder sometimes for people to agree to disagree?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And we're in a very difficult time right now where we're just polarized, it seems like, on so many issues. It's unnecessary. So yeah, I think that, here's my theory. I think the generation gap has gotten bigger, not just because of the polarization, but because the screens in our life went from public to private. So when I was growing up, there was one screen in our house. It was a TV. We all gathered around and watched we called it a program together, and we laughed together, listened together, talked about it afterwards. But today, we've got this smart device in our hand, and it's a private thing. I've got an echo chamber, and I'm interacting with people that are probably my age, that think like me, vote like me, and it's not helpful. So once the screens went to private, now we've got these silos we've got to break out of, and it's going to require that work that I described earlier, that we're going to have to reckon I'm willing to do that work.
So what can we really learn from each other to help us grow as individuals, right? Now, John Maxwell has said before that managers treat everyone the same, but leaders treat everyone differently. Tell me about this idea of chess versus checkers in leadership and how that really plays into the way that leaders should treat other people.
Yeah. So in this book, I offer 6 metaphors or 6 images that start conversations. We believe pictures really are worth 1,000 words. So chess and checkers are both games that are played on the very same game board. So we could be tempted to think, must be the same game. Not true. When I play the game of checkers, all my pieces look alike, they all move alike, so I treat them all alike. In chess, if I have any hope of winning the game, I have to know what each piece can do. That a knight goes up 2 and over 1, and a bishop does this, and a pawn, and a rook, and a king, and a queen. Only in knowing the strength of each piece can I win. I think mediocre leaders, parents, managers play checkers with their people. They treat them all alike, and they get average performance. Great leaders do the work to play chess in the relationships of their life, and they connect with others at the uniqueness of their strength, their personality, and their generation. And those people flourish under the leadership. By the way, isn't this true in our homes? If we have more than one child, they're probably very different, even though they're eating the same meals under the same roof. We've got to play chess rather than checkers. So that's a big idea that I think will enable us to connect with the different generations around us.
How about building up team morale, maybe doing some team bonding and trying some interesting activities that will really close the generation gap on a team? Any suggestions?
Yeah, sure do. One is finding someone that is very different. Let's say a different generation, 20-something, I'm 50-something or 60-something. And I play the game. Well, it's not a game, but it's just an interaction called Tell Me About Your Superpower. I have noticed that all generations bring different strengths to the team. Think about it. The boomer generation brings stories and experience and coaching that they have to offer. Xers bring this pragmatism that they got when they were growing up in a very difficult time in the 70s and 80s. Millennials bring this confidence with them and this hope and idealism. Gen Z brings this hacker mindset and this entrepreneurship that they bring with them as a generation. So if I ask the question, well, first, let's swap stories. We're going to find something common in our stories somewhere, but then share with me your superpower and I'll share with you mine. Almost always those superpowers are derived from who we are and the generation from which we come. So that would be one activity that I think has really helped us at Growing Leaders. We're doing that here, and it's been so fun to see people get to know each other in an unusual way and then glean from each other.
So what's your superpower?
Well, I think mine really is the coaching that I bring. My brain has gone from fluid to crystallized, and this is the 43rd year of my career. So I can tell you back here, this is what we learned from this, and back here is what we learned from that. And I think now, instead of just being a history teacher in my office, I've got to be the one that says, let me give you a couple of really good questions to ask, because we did try that in 2004, and here's what happened. But yet I don't want to rain on the parade. You know how that goes. It's, well, we tried that and it didn't work, so forget it. So I think that's kind of mine. Now, we're obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, one of my favorite practices, Hal, is reverse mentoring. Reverse mentoring is a topic that Jack Welch brought up at General Electric way back in the 1990s. This is where an older generation person and a younger generation person get together. They do swap stories, but this time they're each going to mentor each other in what they bring to the table. So the senior veteran's going to say, here's how to succeed at this organization. I've learned it. But the young person may say, here's how to monetize the latest app I just got on my phone, or how to use it for marketing at this company. And I have no idea how to do that. So like you learn from those younger if you're open. And I'm telling you, reverse mentoring, every week I sit at that table to my left and I'm meeting with Andrew, who's 30 years younger than me. I'm meeting with Cam, who's 40 years younger than me. And I learn every single time.
Yeah, you keep learning and you keep growing. I love that. Dr. Tim Elmore is the author of A New Kind of Diversity, Making the Different Generations on Your Team a Competitive Advantage. Thanks so much for joining us today from Atlanta, Georgia.
Thank you, Hal. It's great to be with you.
It seems like so many voices are calling our attention either one way or the other. The recent strict gun control laws attempted by the Trudeau Liberals have caused quite a stir here in Canada. Now, to talk about it in a little more detail and some of these gun laws is a local hunting guide, Andre Van Hilton of Willow Creek Outfitters, joining us just outside of Stavely, Alberta. Andre, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you, Hal.
So, Andre, what are your thoughts on Bill C-21 and the impact on a lot of sport shooters and hunters?
Well, it's a challenging one for sure. This is it just seems like it's been something that they've constantly wanted, been taking things from the firearms owner, and it just seems like they're just not really directly dealing with the firearms problem. The firearm problem isn't the legally vetted and licensed firearm owners; it's the legal guns that are coming across the border.
So what do you think the government really needs to do when it comes to gun laws then? Maybe going after more the criminals and illegal guns crossing the border, the handguns from the United States?
I think that's where we need to do it, because I think majority of the guns used in the crimes are legally acquired or smuggled across the border, and aren't the ones that are possessed by legally licensed and vetted landowners that store them safely. So I just really think it's maybe to appease the people that are uneducated about guns and gun owners and the proper use of guns, and they've seen probably. A lot of people, the only access or what they've seen from firearms is, in the movies, and where it's used in war or crimes and stuff like that. And that's the only thing that they're seeing guns being used as. So they're viewed as something that is bad, I think.
Montreal Canadiens goaltender Carey Price took to social media and it showed a picture of him in his camo, and he's holding a shotgun saying, listen, I'm not a criminal, I'm a hunter, and these gun laws are not going to do the trick. Like, he's not happy about it. So would you agree with Carey Price that going after, a lot of the hunters with the shotguns is not the way to go?
Yeah, absolutely it is, because, I think you're chasing the wrong problem here, because if they could let us really know what the true statistics are of firearms used in crimes, by properly licensed and vetted and stored firearms, I bet you it's very, very minimal. So, with that being said, then, focus the time and the money into the real problem, which I'm guessing is the legal firearms coming across the border.
Some people say that, hunting, that's more the 18 and 1900s, people out hunting for their food all the time. It's not really as prevalent in today's society. What are your thoughts?
Well, it has become that way because, we're very reliant on, food producers out there, doing it for us and putting it in the store for us. And, we've got it pretty easy this day and age compared to, the thousands of years of our ancestry that's had to, go across the land and find their own food. Here it's basically a one-stop shop in a supermarket and you got all you need. So, we are really removed from it nowadays, but there are so many good things that come from hunting. It's not just, getting your own meat out there. It's time spent in nature. It's time spent with family and friends. And, if you have an appreciation for nature, we'll be able to keep it too. So there's many benefits from hunting, aside from just getting your own meat.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the benefits, specifically, Andre, when it comes to hanging out with your family. Maybe you take your son or your daughter with you, or maybe husband and wife go out and hunting. Let's talk about some of those benefits then. It's almost like, I guess, when you go fishing, right? Take the family out fishing, it's a bonding time, bonding experience.
Well, and that's a huge thing nowadays. I think, nowadays so many people are busy doing things, whether it's on a device or a screen or something like that. And, life is so busy and stuff, but, there's so many things we can learn from nature, and it can actually be a good reset for people to spend time in nature, and it gives you more appreciation for, the other peoples in your life and things, just in general, because everything in nature is very real. Sometimes in the civilized world, we don't know what's real, what's not. And, spending time in nature, there's a lot to show you out there, and it's good for kids to actually, get out and have an appreciation for what there is to offer out there.
So as a hunter yourself, what do you like to hunt? Is it elk, moose, deer? What do you like?
Well, as a hunter, everybody's got their preference. For me, it's something that, really, challenges me just as far as not just the animal, but also in the environment they live in. I really enjoy sheep hunting, and sheep hunting will take you to some extreme country in the mountains, where you're totally removed from going to a, nice warm bed at night and hanging out at the restaurant after a long day's hunting. You got to provide for yourself, and you got to deal with the elements out there. And that part of the challenge, I think, is really where the bigger part of the reward comes, that you feel very rewarded at the end of the day, whether you're successful or not, but that you've just been out there, and, it's very humbling for sure.
What game animals do you think make for some of the best hunts?
Well, I think for most people, in general, I would say, your deer and your elk hunts are probably, because they're very, the populations are very good on the deer and elk there. It just makes it for lots of opportunity, would make for, a good time for especially new hunters or young hunters, right? Where if there's lots of animals out there, means there's maybe more opportunity. It keeps people engaged because there's a lot of opportunities out there for them to, hunt and try their skills at hunting. So those are probably obviously the more popular ones that I think most people in Alberta are going to be hunting if they do go their first hunt.
What are your thoughts on some of the big game hunters over in different countries in Africa where they're hunting lions or even elephants, especially people that want to, I guess, maybe kill the elephants for the tusks, for the ivory? What are your thoughts on those types of hunts?
Well, I think in the bigger scheme of things, the big picture of things, if there's not a value put on something, there won't be an appreciation for it. If you don't put a value on nature and expose our kids to nature, how can we expect them to preserve it? And that same goes with the animals across the world. If there is no value on it, people aren't going to appreciate it, and they're going to abuse it or extort it or whatever how. And, at the end of the day, we're going to lose it if we don't take care of these things. So, there's many different views on hunting across the board, whether it's for meat or for trophy, all at the end of the day. But probably one of the biggest contributors, to help the environment and to help these animals survive are hunter dollars. Hunter dollars, put so much money into the system, whether it's through license sales or through auctions, fundraiser, all stuff. And these are the ones that definitely are the dollars that help conserve these animals and the habitat they live in.
Have you seen changes in the game animal population over the years? What are you really seeing right now?
Well, it all ebbs and flows for sure. And, obviously there's many different variables that affects the population. Obviously, winter kill, in this part of the world, as well as disease and all stuff. Definitely, that's what controls animals before even man had any hand in controlling it. So those are the things that are, definitely, take a role in the population's strengths or weaknesses. And, it all just seems like it goes in cycles. But, I know the game, people that are trying to manage the game are doing the best they can. It's a big undertaking, and my hat's off them for doing it. But, to be able to get a good handle on a huge population of animals that, stretches across the province of Alberta or Canada or something like that, it's definitely a challenging job to be able to manage it properly between those factors of, starvation and disease, as well as hunting pressure.
So, Andre, traditionally, when is the hunting season here in Alberta?
Well, traditionally, the hunting season in Alberta is in the fall. So basically, some things will start in August and then go through December. It all depends on the species and the areas, and obviously the seasons that have been set by the game management people.
Do you have a favorite region of Alberta for hunting, or maybe in Saskatchewan or BC?
Well, they're all, I'm more of an open country person, but also do like the mountains. I've spent a lot of time guiding through Western Canada and a lot of time spent in the mountains. And I just, the mountains are probably my favorite spot for sure. Where we live down here in southwestern Alberta, it's such an amazing place to hunt. It's not just the animals, but it's the location you're in. If you can, just take a moment and see what's out there, from the grass in front of your feet to the mountains in the background, I don't think we live in a much prettier place in the world, that's for sure.
Well, we talked about the federal government auto on Bill C-21, and many hunters are not happy with it right now, the potential gun ban bill with a lot of the rifles, the hunting rifles, the shotguns. What about the province? Has the provincial government been helpful or more of a hindrance to hunters?
Well, I think, Alberta has been one place it seems like, our voice seems to be heard, maybe a little bit more than other provinces. And maybe just because we have, a lot of people living in rural areas and live in the rural way of life. And it's good to see that, Alberta's kind of stepping up and speaking out to the federal government about, how this new laws don't really make sense. It's just, going to use a lot of extra resources, if this law is implemented, to, get these firearms out of the, legal owners. And, and when you do that, it's just going to take away from other parts that are maybe more important, for our law enforcement to be focusing on.
It sounds like you like to spend a lot of time out in the rural areas, the backcountry. So, Andre, why do you think Albertans need to spend more time in the wild lands of our province?
Well, I think it's just, it's a good reality check. Again, it's if you let it be, it's a very humbling experience to be out there because everything in nature is real, right? If it's raining, you got to put a rain jacket on. All these things. There's examples out there that you just can't escape from it, or hide from it by paying somebody to do it, or fixing it on your phone or whatever it is. And I really think the more people that can go out and do that, whether you're canoeing, you're biking, you're hiking, you're horseback riding, trying to go out and hire a guide that can take you out of these places and get somewhere where you're away from the noise. And then the more people that do it, the more people are going to be willing to try to preserve this and try to understand that it's very, very important, for our future generations to be able to use this as much as we have and our past generations have as well.
Andre, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have when it comes to hunting?
Well, I think the biggest misconceptions people have come to hunting is because it seems like we're very removed from it nowadays, that we don't need it to survive because other people are providing the things that we need to survive nowadays. So I think, people just, unfortunately, sometimes, hunting is portrayed in the wrong way. And, there's photos out there and there's things that are said, that, for the ordinary person that isn't around it could seem very, very abrasive, I guess. And, that's just the way it is type deal. But I think people, quickly forget that, many of our generation in the past, that's the only way that they have survived, and it was put on this earth for us, to utilize and for us to be able to, feed our families and all that kind of stuff. And, it's a great way to do that because, you're 100% organic meat. And as well, it's a great time to spend outside with your family.
Outside of the challenges being offered by Bill C-21, what other issues are there when it comes to hunting in the 21st century?
Well, I think that one of the biggest things is concern is, the encroachment of, of cities and us humans on the habitat of the animals. And unfortunately, the animals always lose in this situation, because they kept on getting pushed out of their homes into other places, which congregates them. And then that's when your situations can happen when there's disease spread and stuff like that too. But, every one of us on this earth has displaced some form of wildlife. You know, we have our homes here, we have our roads, you know, we have our cities, we have our towns. We have all played a role in displacing this wildlife and congregating them into areas. And I think that is probably the biggest threat that we have to the wildlife in North America right now.
So, Andre, before I let you go, what are some of the biggest rewards that you find when it comes to hunting, you personally?
Well, you know, in my line of work, you know, I've been doing this since I've been out of school, so it's been a long time. I won't quite tell you how long it's been, but it's been a long time. You know, the amazing thing is that, you know, it pulls people out of their regular environment, and quite often nowadays, you know, we are so busy, and everybody says they don't have time, all this stuff. And, you know, people come out and get a breath of fresh air, and, you know, spend some time in nature and around wildlife. And you know, it brings on a whole new attitude for them. And it's a breath, you know, it's pretty awesome to see that people really do appreciate it. And I think people could really do more of it, but we only have so much time once again. But the people that actually take the time to do this stuff, you know, it's very, very rewarding. And, you know, it's been very rewarding for me to be able to expose so many people to this, or be able to take people out on these different adventures and show them what it's all about and educate them about it, you know, just so they can pass that on to their family and their friends, and, you know, hopefully preserve this for future generations.
Andre Van Hilton with Willow Creek Outfitters, thanks so much for joining us today from just outside of Staveley, Alberta.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.